Hello and welcome to another Magic 2015 gameplay. Today we are revisiting our land destruction deck. It's still just red and green for a better mana base, and I am trying out Young Pyromancer combos with all our land destruction spells, which are of course the important part of the deck. We're trying to mess with our opponent's mana base, and Tectonic Rift also has the ability to prevent our opponent from blocking, which works well with cards like Rabblemaster and Young Pyromancer. We also have Demolish as another land destruction card, also works on artifacts. And finally, our last land destruction card is Mold Shambler. When you kick him for 6 mana total, you can destroy a non-creature permanent, which includes lands. And we also have a Charmbreaker Devils to return those 2 land destruction spells back to our hand so we can try and repeat it. And then the rest of the deck is basically a ramp shell with cards like Cultivate and Darksteel Ingot and some removal and some big creatures sparkled in, and you've got a deck. So let's start from the beginning here. We've got a Banefire. Since we are ramping, a nice big finisher is always welcome and also can be used early if we really have to. We've got Shock as a one-off for the early game as an additional burn spell. Then Pyromancer to combo with all our instants and sorceries, which we do have quite a bit of. And also just a 2-power 2-drop that can start attacking while we deny our opponent's lands. Same goes with Rabblemaster, a very quick win condition that can certainly kill in 2 or 3 turns if the opponent's unable to cast anything. Then we've got Anger of the Gods to clean up whatever small creatures the opponent might have been able to cast before we started messing with their lands. So you do want to be careful with Anger of the Gods if you're playing with cards like Pyromancer and Rabblemaster, so you want to make sure that you cast it whenever appropriate. Then Tectonic Rift and Demolish at 4 mana, which is expensive for a land destruction spell. And this is also why this deck is sometimes a little janky, but when you do get to the 4 mana and the opponent hasn't played any significant threat and is perhaps missing a few land drops, then you can really punish them. Then we've got Stormbreath as another quick win condition, and Inferno Titan, a must-have in any red deck, especially if you're trying to ramp a bit. Then Charmbreaker Devils as another excellent 6-drop to go with the land destruction spells. We've got Cultivate, which is nice in a ramp shell, also goes with the Young Pyromancer. Mold Shambler, because we do want to get up to 6 mana, so we need to ramp a bit in order to kick him, but you can always play him as a 3/3/4/4 if you really have to. And then Arbor Colossus, another powerful win condition. And some more ramp in Darksteel Ingot, and then a powerful removal spell in Ground Assault. And our mana base is pretty straightforward, just 4 Gruul Guildgate and then 10 of each. So yeah, let's try out the deck and see how it does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener. We are missing red mana, but we do have a Darksteel Ingot. So this hand is by no means great, but we are on the play and we do have a 6 mana land destruction spell, so this game is probably not gonna revolve around land destruction too much if we can only cast it turn 6. So I think I'll try another one. Alright, so we do need to draw some lands, but if we do draw 2 lands in the following, let's say 3 turns, then we should be able to go Pyromancer into Demolish and or Tectonic Rift, which should be pretty powerful. We are also still missing green for Ground Assault, but sometimes you do need to get lucky. Playing against a Plains from the opponent. Not sure if he has a turn 1 play, he does. And it's gonna be an equipment in Adventuring Gear, so landfall get +2/+2. So it looks to be somewhat an aggressive deck from the equipment. So let's hope we draw some lands, preferably forests, and there we go. Alright. Yeah, and I think this is a pretty easy Pyromancer. We could play it so we could try and take advantage of Anger of the Gods here. But our opponent hasn't played anything, and we do have another spot removal spell in Ground Assault, so I'm just gonna go for the Pyromancer here. And if we draw our 4th land, we are in business. Of course, the landfall from the Adventuring Gear might mean that our opponent perhaps has also green in his deck with Cultivate. But looks like that's not the case yet. There we see a Trained Caracal. 1/1 lifelink, so goes well with the equipment, which our opponent could equip for 1 mana here. And he does. So I think, even though this is a pretty bad creature, using Ground Assault might be a pretty powerful tempo play, because our opponent just spent a mana equipping, playing the equipment, and we just have to hope next turn to hit a land drop, and then we can start going to town. So I'm gonna make the greedy play here and go for the Ground Assault, and hope that our opponent doesn't have a more powerful creature down the line here that we can't handle. And we can get in for 2 damage, which is also relevant. Alright, so we've got a pretty decent chance of hitting a land drop next turn that comes into play untapped. We've got 17 lands left, plus 4 gates. Let's see if our opponent has a creature here. No play, and our opponent left. Wow, okay. And there's our land. So I think we can start... We could actually destroy the artifact, but the fact that we can make creatures unable to block might also be relevant. So I think I'll actually use the Demolish here to destroy land instead of the Tectonic Rift. And get in for 3 damage. And hope our opponent is still unable to play anything. We are very far away from casting Arbor Colossus, but unless we find a Cultivate here... Alright, there's a forest. And given that our opponent missed a land drop, I'm just gonna go for Tectonic Rift here. Hope our opponent does not play something like Raise the Alarm. He does not. And just get in for 4 damage, with our opponent only having 1 land in play. And it's gonna be pretty hard to come back from this, as our opponent still didn't find land, so perfect circumstances for the land destruction deck, and we got lucky with all our land drops. We can even play Arbor Colossus, so this game went according to plan, I would say. Get in for 5, and our opponent should be dead next turn. Alright, still no play, another Arbor Colossus, but we can simply attack. And yeah, looks like our opponent was playing green, but was missing his green sources. And even if he did find the green sources, we would have destroyed them, so... Alright, on to the next game. Alright, let's take a look at our opener. We are on the draw, and we have gate into turn 2 Pyromancer, turn 3 Rabblemaster. If we hit some land drops, Demolish. Yeah, I think this is keepable. Given that we're on the draw, we're more likely to hit our land drops. And we're playing against a suboptimal deck, which increases our chances. So let's lead with our Guildgate and see what we're up against. Mountain so far, and Island, so could be the Kiln Fiend deck. There's a Young Pyromancer. So now we have an interesting decision we have to make. We could just Ground Assault the Young Pyromancer and get rid of it. Or we could try and get greedy and play our own Pyromancer. A third option is trying to play this Anger of the Gods for value, which I don't hate actually. So if we do go with the Ground Assault here, next turn we could also play the Rabblemaster, which could be a pretty powerful play. We can also ask the question of what creature do we lead with and bait the removal spell with. Would we rather have the Rabblemaster or the Pyromancer in play? And I think it's actually pretty close. So given that I don't know which the better play is here, I think I'll just bank on this Anger of the Gods, play the Forest for now to not give away the Anger yet, and pause a turn and hope our opponent plays another creature, like Kiln Fiend for example. That would be ideal. Instead, think twice, our opponent's not playing into the Anger of the Gods, but we still get to cast it, and now we don't have to worry about having an Anger of the Gods in hand with Pyromancer or Rabblemaster, so we can freely play our creatures and use the Ground Assault later. So let's go ahead and cast this. Opponent can make a token if he wants, but that's gonna die anyways. And pass the turn. And now we need to hope that we find another land drop, so we can go Pyromancer into Ground Assault, or just destroy a land. But our opponent's just gonna flashback Think Twice, so maybe is missing some action, which probably means he's got a bunch of land drops. So now we are faced with the decision of playing Darksteel Ingot, Pyromancer or a Rabblemaster. If we play the Ingot here, then we could perhaps play Stormbreath next turn if we hit a land drop, or just go Ground Assault plus Pyromancer next turn for sure. And I don't hate that, given that most likely our opponent is gonna have cheap removal spells like Shock or perhaps Vapor Snag, and those don't really deal with a Stormbreath Dragon. Then again, our opponent could be playing counter spells as well, in which case I think I'll just lead with a cheap creature. Yeah, this is very suspicious, our opponent leaving up all this mana. So we could go for the Pyromancer or the Rabblemaster or both. And I think I'll lead with the Pyromancer here. Try and get this countered if he does have a counter spell. And there's a Dissolve, and now we can try and play the Rabblemaster. If our opponent has a Shock, he can deal with it. But at least we got rid of a counter spell. Let's see if we can go to combat here. We can, and get a token which can attack right away. And next turn we can play a Stormbreath, so hopefully our opponent taps out to deal with the Rabblemaster. So yeah, our opponent was more controlling than I thought. I was expecting a Kiln Fiend deck, instead this is a Talrand deck. And their opponent is leaving up 2 mana here, which could both be a negate or a way to counter the Stormbreath. And Anger of the Gods is also interesting. So what we could do is just go after our opponent's lands, but then this Talrand starts going out of control. So I don't really like that. I do want to either play Stormbreath here, or just Ground Assault the Talrand. Yeah, I think we do need to get rid of this Talrand right away. So let's try this. Let's see if he has a negate or a Vapor Snag, alright. Also works. So our opponent still gets the Drake token. So I don't think we send in the Rabblemaster here, unless we do want to trade. The advantage of trading here is that next turn our opponent is unlikely to be able to double block Stormbreath, which is nice. On the other hand, I think just sending in with 2 goblins is not bad here. Yeah, let's just send in those. So our opponent blocks, takes 1, and I'm not interested in casting Anger here, unless our opponent plays the Talrand and something else. So yeah, land destruction looks like a pretty poor plan against the opponent with 7 lands in play, and our opponent has our Pyromancer to get back Dissolve, which I'm guessing he's gonna keep up from now on. And there it is. And he still has a Talrand in hand. So I think we can try and bait the counterspell with the Demolish, because I don't want to get either of the 2 big creatures countered here. The Archaeomancer can now start blocking our 1/1s, which is not great. So there's also the off chance of our opponent having the Sphinx Bone Wand, the artifact for 7 mana, in which case we might want to keep the Demolish in hand. But I think if he did have it in hand, he would have just slammed it down. So yet again, a couple of decisions here. Given that we don't have any removal spells for Talrand other than the Anger, I don't think I want to cast it here. So let's just try and bait the Dissolve here. Hopefully this gets countered. It does not. Oh well. So we get 2 tokens. So I think at this point we might as well attack with the Rabblemaster, since the 1/1s aren't doing anything, and our opponent at least has to trade the Drake token. And then next turn we can try and Anger of the Gods the Talrand. So we're not in a great spot here, but we do have a fighting chance if our opponent makes a mistake here. We do need him to tap out. There's a Talrand, so we can certainly get Dissolve out of his hand by casting Anger of the Gods. But then we can't play anything else, so we really do need to find a cheap removal spell, and there it is. Alright, so we can bait the Dissolve with the Crown Assault. Our opponent gets a Drake token, and then we kill both of them with Anger of the Gods. So that went pretty well for us. And then next turn we can finally start playing our big creatures. And I think I might as well attack with my Goblin. You never know that he doesn't get blocked, because our opponent's fearing some sort of 1 damage spell. But our opponent has no fear. Alright, let's get these out of here. And pause a turn, and now it's our 5-drop and 6-drop up against our opponent's 3 unknown cards, and there's a Kiln Fiend. So Kiln Fiend is a strange choice in a deck that also features Dissolve, but it does work well with Vapor Snag and Think Twice, and of course goes in the same deck as Pyromancer in that aspect. We did find a land. Our opponent has 2 cards in hand. So what do we want to lead with is the question. There's some pretty nice cards we could get back with the Devils. I think I'll lead with the Stormbreath though. If this gets countered, so be it. It does not. So let's send in for 4. And we can go monsters next turn, I believe. So this puts the quickest clock on our opponent. I think we do play the land here. Pause a turn, and now our opponent can go to town with the Kiln Fiend if he wants to, if he has some flashback spells. And there's a Resounding Thunder for 3. So does our opponent have another removal spell here to finish off the Stormbreath? Maybe he has an Anger of the Gods he wants to play post-combat. So we get hit for 4. And yep, there's the Anger of the Gods. So that makes sense. but now we still have a Charmbreaker Devils and an Arbor Colossus, so yeah, let's play the Devils here. It has a pretty high chance of surviving and getting us back a card, which could be Anger, could be Ground Assault, or could be Demolish. Opponent just hit a land. And let's see what we get back. It's a Demolish and an Anger of the Gods, so let's see. We can pump this twice, which is 12 damage, and our opponent will be dead. So Devils gets bumped for 4. We play Anger. Devils gets bumped again. And 12 damage is neatly enough for a win. Alright, so pretty interesting game there. Let's move on to the next game. Alright, let's take a look at our opening hand, which features some ramp, some sweepers, and 2 land destruction spells, so easy keep. And let's lead with Guildgate, pause the turn. So ideally we can get a 2-for-1 with this Anger of the Gods and then lock out our opponent with these Demolishes. Worst case scenario, this does nothing and our opponent just plays a giant creature and kills us. Alright, Stormbreath is nice. Let's see what our opponent is playing. Boros Guildgate so far. Let's see what the other play is here. Another Guildgate into Trained Caracal. Alright, so it could be a red-white aura deck. And we did hit our 4th land drop here. So I am just tempted to get rid of this Caracal with Anger of the Gods, because if our opponent enchants this with a bunch of stuff next turn, it could be out of reach of the Anger of the Gods. If our opponent goes Nimbus Wings into, let's say, Ethereal Armor, then this is a pretty difficult threat to deal with. And the Aura deck also just has a pretty low number of creatures, so if you can get rid of the creatures, then it might be that the opponent is just stuck with a bunch of Auras in hand. And given that we had our 4th land drop, I don't think it's necessary to play the Ingot, although we could just go Ingot into Stormbreath, which should be pretty good against the red-white deck. But I'm gonna play it safe here and play the Anger of the Gods. And play the Demolish next turn. And try and slow down our opponent. And then try and win with Stormbreath. Alright, 3rd land into. Is this a Brimaz? Or just another small creature? Alright, there's the heroic Hoplite. And there's a Nimbus Wings, so yeah. Couldn't have stopped this with Anger of the Gods anyways. So now we have to recalibrate. There's another Anger. So we could just go Ingot here and play Stormbreath next turn. But this is a red creature, so I don't think the Stormbreath will be able to really fight the Hoplite if our opponent just puts another enchantment on it. So I think we might just have to Demolish here. Take out the Guildgate. And try and slow down the opponents so he can't put a giant enchantment on it. And then I guess race with the Stormbreath. Try and get it monstrous, which might be big enough to stop the Hoplite. But it's not gonna be easy. We could also hope to find one of our cheaper removal spells, which we can play in combination with Anger of the Gods to take out the Hoplite. And there's a Furor, which is gonna give essentially +3 to the Hoplite. But now it does have to attack every turn, so our Stormbreath can at least fight back. But it's gonna be difficult to raise a 6-power creature here. Well, we did find a land, so we do have a chance. Could also just play another land destruction spell, but I think then we're pretty much dead to the hoplite. Unless we chum block at some point. So yeah, I think we just play the Stormbreath here. Hope our opponent misses some land drops and does nothing. And we might have a chance. We are attacking, of course, since we're not blocking. So, had this been a Caracal with all the enchantments, then the Stormbreath would have been able to stay on defense. So perhaps we just should have played the Ingot turn 3 instead of the Anger. But I guess Anger is good here too. So we go down to 8. Opponent goes down to 12. We can Ingot into Anger here. So yeah, I think it's Ingot into Anger here. Could also Ingot into Demolish, but then we get hit for... yeah, then we're dead. So that doesn't work. So yeah, let's Ingot it up and hope our opponent does not have another enchantment to kill us. Because I don't really want to chump with the Stormbreath. So opponent goes to 12. And next turn we could go Monstrous. Hit him for 7 plus whatever cards in hand he has. So if our opponent draws a card and does literally nothing besides attacking us, then we could win. But looks like that's not the case. GG's. Alright, we're dead. One enchantment too many here. But yeah, if our opponent did not play anything, he had 5 cards in hand, we go Monstrous. That's 7 power plus 5 damage from the ability, and our opponent would have died. But now, even with the life gain from Ordeal, an interesting game there. I'm not sure if we made the right calls, but let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which does not feature any land destruction, but we do have Shock for the early game, and then Cultivate into Charmbreaker Devils. And we are on the play, so this is a pretty explosive hand if we can find some expensive cards to cast, so I think I'll keep it. It's not great by any means, but if we find a Pyromancer here, or just another 5-drop or 6-drop we can cast, then we are in business. Opponent leads with Mystic Monastery, so we do like to see Tri-lands as the land destruction deck. Let's just play Forest, pause a turn. And next turn, just grab a couple of mountains. Does our opponent have another Tri-land, perhaps? Or something we can shock? Alright, there's another Tri-land. So it looks like our opponent's playing all 5 colors. Yep, let's just cultivate here. And grab some mountains. And pause the turn. So we don't have a play next turn since we drew some lands here. But the turn after we can Devils and hopefully start killing some creatures with this shock. But our opponent plays yet another Tri-land and we don't have the land destruction to punish our opponent. Guess we'll just cast another Cultivate here. Get the green side of things. And pause the turn. So, lots of lands, but yet to see a spell that doesn't involve lands. Alright, this is funny. Okay, I did not expect Demolish out of the 5-color deck, so we could Charmbreaker here, or we could Stormbreath. I do like Stormbreath as it puts a clock on right away, but Charmbreakers is also pretty nice as it gets us another Cultivate, And that pumps up the Devils. Our opponent still no creature in play, so this threatens to deal 8. Now let's see if our opponent has another land destruction spell. Another Guildgate instead. I would actually be happy to see another land destruction spell. Instead it's a Ground Assault, taking out the Devils, which is fine, as we still have a dragon. And I don't think it's reasonable to wait on the dragon to try and monstrous it the same turn, because that would be more than 5 turns away. So let's just get in there, hope our opponent does not have another Ground Assault here, because we are out of gas. Another Tri-land, because why not? 5 cards still in hand, and that's a Treasured Find, which unfortunately is gonna get back the Ground Assault and not the Demolish. So that's 1 dead Stormbreath and 1 empty hand. And never mind, there's Mr. Arbor Colossus saying hello. Let's play Forest, pause a turn, and let our opponent deal with this one. Of course, had we been able to cast this instead of the Charmbreaker Devils, our opponent did not have the 6 lands in play to kill this. Instead, the reverse happened and our opponent has a 3rd Ground Assault and a Tectonic Rift, which we don't care about, so at least we've got that going for us. So we need to top deck yet again, and we do. Rabblemaster. And I do think we do play the land here. Get in for 1. And hope our opponent does not have more removal. And hope our opponent does not have a big creature we can't handle, because Shock is not a Ground Assault. So pretty funny game so far. Our opponent in his 5-color deck cast more land destruction than we did, and Jesus Christ, that's a 4th Ground Assault. Alright. Masked Admirers. We could shock this, or we could Anger of the Gods this, since then it'll get exiled. But I don't think we're in a hurry to do anything, as we draw yet another land. I guess we could keep this one in hand. Yeah, I think we just pause the turn here. I don't think it's worth killing this, because our opponent could get it back, and getting in for 1 is not gonna get it done. So I wanna Anger of the Gods here, but I think we can get more value than just 1 creature. So I'm just gonna pause the turn. If our opponent plays something like a 5 toughness creature, we can also Anger plus shock it. And if we Anger right now, we don't have that option. Opponent gets in. I think we just take it here. And hope to find some other threat. Opponent has an Angel, which is perfect, so we can Anger plus shock it. Alright, finally found some land destruction, but not for now. Gonna try and get in for 1. I don't think our opponent's gonna block. He does not. And let's see. Alright. And this should work. So, let's see, what land do we want to blow up? I guess I'll take out the monastery here. Could keep this in hand for an artifact, but our opponent is playing a 5-color deck, might have some expensive cards in hand. So I think it's more likely that this destroying a land does something rather than hoping our opponent has an artifact in his deck. Let's see what he gets back. Gets back another ground assault, so our next creature does nothing. Alright, so we need a couple of top decks here. Cultivate is not great, but at least get some lands out of our deck. I think we need more red. Perhaps should have gone 1-1. Oh well. So the land destruction mirror is not going great as our opponent has a 3-3 in play and another one, which will get probably another ground assault. Yep, so our opponent has our next 2 creatures covered. So yeah. Not the greatest. Land is not great. So do we even have a way to win here? I guess if we go Arbor Colossus and make it monstrous right away, then it could go out of ground assault range. So I think that's our only reasonable out. Alright, Soothsayer. I guess it combos with the Jeskai, Warden of the Eye here, and with Treasured Find. Alright, Inferno Titan at least kills one of our opponent's creatures. So let's cast this, I guess. Opponent uses 1 ground assault, still has 1 left. And has exactly 6 lands to kill the Titan. Well, I guess the plan of playing Stormbreath and making it monsters doesn't sound as ridiculous now. So, let's see, even if we do top deck the Arbor Colossus here, we're still dead. No, we're not. We would take 2, go to 1, but now the Wayfinder is lethal. So even Arbor Colossus won't do it. Wow, this is one crazy deck. Doesn't have a ton of direction, but I guess it drew pretty well. And we have yet another Cultivate. And we don't have many lands left, unfortunately. Or I guess fortunately. So we'll just pause a turn and make our opponent kill us. So yeah. Our opponent left. But he is still gonna win here. But I guess our opponent leaving is a moral victory. So let's move on to one final game. Alright, let's take a look here at our opener. We're on the play and we have a Rabblemaster and Anger of the God, so we can go either on the aggressive here or play defense. And we also have a 4-drop land destruction spell in Demolish, plus a Mold Shambler down the line. I think we can keep. Lead with a mountain, pause a turn, and see if we need to cast Anger on 3 or if we can play a Rabblemaster. Alright, there's a Guildgate. And we draw another Mold Shambler. Let's play Forest, pause the turn. And depending on what our opponent does here, we have to decide what direction we want to take. Satyr Wayfinder A. Alright. Let's see what he reveals. So we can deduce what our opponent's playing. Looks like a Sultai graveyard deck. So against the graveyard deck we want to keep Anger of the Gods in hand for spider spawning, or for if our opponent has a ton of small creatures we want to exile. So I think we do just play a Rabblemaster here and let it do some damage. Send in a Goblin. Our opponent's likely gonna block it, but we'll find out. He does. So if our opponent has Necromancer's Assistant here, then he could block the Rabblemaster, but then we just don't attack with it. And let's see if that's the play here. Yep, there it is. So I'm just not gonna send in the Rabblemaster, let our 1/1s do some work. And there's Talrand and Doorkeeper. Doorkeeper makes sense with the self-milling, although it's pretty slow. Talrand, I'm not sure. Alright. I guess we just demolish here. And just go for the Guildgate. We could also go for the black source, since our opponent could only have one black source. This is our opponent's only green source. Yeah, I think we'll go for the gate. It's a little more value. And send in the Goblin, which has to attack thanks to Rabblemaster. And we are getting close to kicking the Mold Shambler here, which is nice. So hopefully we draw another land in the next 2 turns. And hopefully our opponent doesn't have many more lands. A lot of ifs. There's our opponent's green source, so did not really cut anything off. There's a quest for the Gravelord, which we don't really care about, and a Think Twice, which does help our opponent finding more lands, but no significant plays here. And another Rabblemaster. So I do think we do play the Rabblemaster here, but the downside is that our own Rabblemaster has to attack as well. So our opponent gets to trade, but we'll have 3 goblins in play plus a Rabblemaster. Our other option is playing this one post-combat and just sending in the 1 goblin, and then hoping our opponent finally takes the trade here. But I don't think that's very likely. Although perhaps our opponent playing the quest here changes our opponent's decision. So again, I could go either way here. I think I'll just go for it. Give our opponent some credit. And send in all the goblins. Which now also includes our first Rabblemaster. Opponent has to block this one pretty much and takes 3 down to 16. And the next turn we can try and do some damage with the remaining Rabblemaster. The quest is on 2 counters, needs 3. And I think twice. Alright, so Rabblemaster is gonna connect. And hopefully we draw land here. Yes, we do. So we get to Mold Shambler. We could even destroy the quest if we want to, which is also interesting. But I do want to cut off our opponent casting Spider Spawning, which would get him 4 tokens at this point, which I think is more relevant than a quest. So I'll just, I guess, take out the black source this time instead of the Guildgate, since our opponent has a forest and an island in play. So yeah, let's play this kicked. Take out the swamp. If we can target it, that is. Nope, that's an island. That's a swamp. And get in with everyone, which is gonna hurt quite a bit, as our Rabblemaster gets +4 power. So unless our opponent can manage to make some blockers, he's gonna be dead next turn. And with no black sources, there's not a ton of removal spells our opponent could play. 4th land. 6 cards in hand, there's a Visionary. So still dead if he doesn't have a second blocker. And Visionary... yeah, I can block our Shambler and block our Rabblemaster. But never mind, so Inferno Titan, our opponent loses the 2 Visionaries, gets a 5/5, but we have enough lethal attackers here, so pretty lucky top deck, but I think we would have been able to win without it. So quest goes off if our opponent so desires. Gets a 5/5, but we managed to attack with everyone, and that's gonna do it. Alright, so I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day.